I call this thrown out of the nest from a quote from Pema Chodron. Many of us are familiar with her. I've been learning from her for decades now. And her quote that I've got up here is, to be fully alive, fully human, and completely awake is to be continually thrown out of the nest. So we have to be willing to experience each moment as fresh and new. And we're doing this with a nervous system that never forgets anything from the past. So that's our challenge, is to be able to be here in this moment, not dragged back into traumatic memory. But even when we're here and completely aware of this moment, the unconscious perception of our safety and danger includes everything that's ever happened to us from the past and a neuroception that's got a negativity bias. Better safe than sorry. So one of the things she talks about a lot, and the titles of her books tell a lot about her teaching, is that things falling apart happens all the time. Things come together and they fall apart. That's just how life works. And as we can accept that, we can have more joy, but we also have more room for the real. We're able to be present with what is. Most of us resist change and we suffer. And when we can let go of what we want to have happen, or when we can let go of our resistance to change, we stop struggling against it, then we can relax into what's real now. And when we think back about our experience with that, one of the things that's good to know is that we all resist change. We all resist negative change in particular. So when something happens that's big and that threatens someone we know or ourselves, our own health, the environment, so many things that are threatening, then we're going to want that to be not the case. We're going to want it to be different. The somatic mindfulness inquiry that I do is cultivate this willingness to stay with uncomfortable energy. And as we do that, we become more resilient and strong, but we also stop being so afraid. So when we feel fear, we don't automatically try to get away from it, or we do, and then we come back sooner. So we take it as, okay, there's something here that's unsettling. I have a perception of threat. Now I need to get into that and really look at it. How can I work with that in a way that will help? One of the things that we know is that as we become more regulated, we're less likely to be in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that gives us more opportunity to let our higher level brain development really look at a situation. And we might feel more comfortable around something because we don't take it so personally. But we also don't want to override our own nervous system. We don't want to believe everything our nervous system tells us. So, all of our perception of threat, we need to be able to be present and go, is that really true? How big of a threat is here? And we're going to work with that in a minute. When we have a little bit more regulation, we're also more able to look through a trauma lens. So, when somebody is really annoying or scary, sometimes it's because they are really anxious. And it doesn't have anything to do with us. It's more to do with what's going on with them. But because of our history, we take that as a threat. The other thing that we try to do as good people is we try to help other people, sometimes at our own expense. We don't get a gold star, but you know what I mean by that. Like, we don't improve the situation often by just letting someone rant or rave at us. When their nervous system is dysregulated, they can often take it out on us, so to speak. And it doesn't actually help. So we might feel compassion and we could still set really clear boundaries with somebody. When I'm in a state of freeze, I'm more likely to let somebody go on and on and on about something. When I'm more regulated and present, I'm more likely to say, "Now let's stop talking about politics. We don't agree. There's nothing we can do. Let's just talk about something else," and not take it personally. When we look at the kinds of things that's alarming us, we can see that there are many different versions of this. Let's sit here for a moment and just kind of look. First of all, who and what is alarming us? So here's some examples. Someone who feels disconnected and is not paying attention to us might feel threatening. Someone who's super anxious and agitated and nervous feels like, well, that could be a danger to me because they're not regulated. So sometimes just being around people who are not regulated can feel alarming to us. And again, it's that lifelong experience of knowing that someone who's not regulated could be a danger to us. Then there's people who are perhaps in a fight response or perhaps are being mean or are a bully. Sometimes when they look at us a certain way, it reminds us of in the past, someone looked at us in that way and that was dangerous to us. Sometimes it's not as dangerous now. We have more ability to regulate around someone who's grumpy, for instance. When someone was grumpy and we were a child, that was a much bigger threat than when somebody's grumpy and we're an adult. But there are also people who are cruel, use contempt or sarcasm to control us. So, what do we do then? When we see that look on someone's face, when somebody is talking over everybody else or they're kind of aggressive, they have different views, they make it clear from the way they talk or the way they engage that they don't really see us as a human being. That is a threat. So, let's sit back for a moment. We're going to do a practice around this. So, if you were to bring to mind a situation from the past, could be recent past or a little bit farther back, bring to mind something that resonates around this. Somebody who was in a situation with you that was alarming you. So, because we're working with this as a memory, the answer to the next question is no. Is there a clear and present danger, and do you need to take action? Not when we're doing an inquiry. Although, if you were doing this in a real life situation, which I highly recommend because it's very helpful, it might not be a no. You might need to stand up and leave. You might need to say something. You might need to protect yourself. So, the first thing we do when we're looking into who and what is alarming us is we ask that question: do I need to do something right now? And notice what that feels like in your body. When we're remembering a situation, we're going to feel the threat of that situation and we're going to feel like we need to do something. And what we do is often we go into fight, flight, or freeze. Just a reminder of the regulating tools. We can tap on the forehead, bring your attention into the sound and sensation of that. We could put an image into a frame on the other side of the room. Keep your eyes open, which helps us to see visually that we're not in danger right now. Take your eyes around the empty space on the outside of the frame a couple times in each direction. You could hold your own hands. You could become aware of your feet and seat. You could do some cyclic sighing, the deep double inhale, long exhale. There are many ways that we can keep ourselves regulated as we do this. So, our nervous system, if you're thinking about this incident that we're going to work with, our nervous system is sending signals that we're not safe. By practicing regulation, emotionally regulating ourselves, we're sending signals that we are safe enough. We're reversing that cycle that happens. So, this incident that we're thinking about comes up. We start to notice that maybe our breath gets a bit different. We're holding our breath, we're breathing more shallow. We might be feeling heat coming up, that we're getting angry. So, in this situation, we're going to stay with this a little bit and focus on regulating our own nervous system. How could we do that? One of the things we could do is to notice what is it about this in particular that needs to change so that I would feel safer. If we're looking at a situation where somebody is showing us contempt, for instance, the obvious answer would be for them to stop doing that. And then we would feel safer. So, oftentimes, when we're looking at this, we really want something about the situation or about them to change. And it's not right or wrong. It would be actually very helpful. Let's sit with that for a moment. What is it that you need to have change in the person or the situation for you to feel safer? And then notice if it's likely that that's going to happen. So, if we were to take an example of someone who's really agitated and anxious, so someone else is very dysregulated. So, not someone who's trying to harm us, but someone who's very dysregulated. We're around this person, maybe we're with two or three other people, and this person is looking around the room, is restless, is maybe their foot is tapping 100 miles a minute. Somebody is really dysregulated. So, what is it that we could do to change that situation? Telling them to calm down probably isn't going to work. But perhaps as we get more regulated, they might catch that from us. People co regulate with the most regulated person in the room. And we could also maybe look around and notice who else is here. So maybe one person has all of our attention because they're the most dysregulated. They feel like mostly they are the threat. But maybe everybody else in the room is a little bit safer to focus on. So if you're with somebody who's a little bit more of a threat, but there are one or two other people in the room, maybe you could attune more to them. Put most of your attention on them. As we're doing this, make sure that you stay grounded in this moment. We're doing a somatic inquiry. Whatever the big threats are in your life is probably going to be right here, right now. So even though in these inquiries it's helpful to work with a little bit lower of a level of threat, it's probably pushing through if there's a big threat in your life right now. If there's somebody in your life that's difficult, especially. Notice your breath. Let yourself stay present. Our nervous system sends us signals that there's a danger here. One of the things it does is it attracts our attention to that person, which makes sense. I'm not saying that that's a wrong thing to do, but it alarms us. So let's practice now. Let all of that move a bit to the background. And how could you regulate yourself right now? What would be helpful? Take some deeper breaths. Feel your seat and feet. Engage with other safer people. So let's practice some of that. You could look at first what are the images and possibly the words, the sounds, the scents. What is it about the situation that's alarming you? And let's work with the thoughts first. We're going to shift our focus by looking at the image. You could put it in a frame. Who is in that image? Is it somebody's face? Is it an energy that you feel? Is it words? So, tapping is often helpful. We could tap lightly on our forehead. Take your attention away from the image or the words. Bring it into the sound and the sensation of the tapping. Take your eyes around that empty space outside of the frame. If you're looking at the image on the wall, there's the image, the frame. It's also helpful to pull back our perspective to see yourself in the image. So if you're looking at out of your own eyes an image of yourself and say three other people, one of whom is really agitated, see if you could pull back enough so that you're seeing yourself in the picture too. That really helps our mind to recognize that we're not in the situation, we're looking at an image of a situation. And if you were actually there in that situation, what could you be doing that would be helpful? So, oftentimes, you can still look across the room, just let your eyes get a bit unfocused and do that, looking at the image, look at the space around it. You might be able to still hold your own hands, or if you can't, you could maybe put your hand on your knee or your thigh and just kind of pet yourself a little bit. Just soothe yourself by noticing the texture, the feeling of that. So, some things we can do even when we're around other people and nobody thinks anything about it. We could tap on our leg instead of on our forehead. If you're imagining yourself in the situation, you might also be doing long exhales. So you're probably not going to do the cyclic sighing where you're going breathing out through your mouth, because that would be really obvious that you're doing that. But anybody could also just take a little bit deeper inhale. And you could open your mouth just a little bit and breathe out through your mouth. You could just breathe out through your nose. But as you're breathing out, count to 6. Deep inhales, longer exhales. And as you're doing that, see yourself in the situation. See the other people in the situation. Notice what's happening to your perception of threat. If you were actually in the situation, there might be something you need to do. You might need to set a boundary. You might need to stand up and leave the room. I need a glass of water. Does anybody else want one? Or just leave. But right now, as you're sitting with this, allow the memory or the image or the words to be here a little bit, and keep yourself really aware of your body, of your breath. And if you're imagining what you might say it in long sentences. Take a deep inhale. And then as you're talking, you might say something like, that tone of voice isn't really necessary here. I'd really appreciate it if you could lighten up that a little bit. Once we get that 6-second exhalation going, it helps the nervous system to go into a relaxation response. So it starts to reverse the signals of danger and create some signals of it's safe enough for me to be here. You might get really regulated with your seat, your feet. Notice that you're steady. Relax your shoulders. Notice your body. So as you're looking at that image and being aware of the situation we're inquiring into, if you could soften your forehead and eyebrows, let your neck and shoulders release. Count in your mind, inhaling 3, exhaling to 6. If you're looking at that image, let everything else around the image soften, but look directly at the image. Everything else gets a bit fuzzy or out of focus. And then let everything else come into sharp focus. You see the paint on the wall behind the image. You see the other things on the wall. I can see a plant. I can see a picture. I can see out my window. Notice what else you can see. And then bring your attention back into what's in that image again, in that frame. And then focus again, shift your focus again to everything else. We want to do just enough regulating that we remember that we're here in this moment and that we're safe. We're safe enough. And now let's look back into who and what is alarming you. Notice your neuroception now. What is your perception of the danger that's here right now? When we're doing an inquiry, there isn't an immediate danger that we need to take action on. But we might be thinking about something we need to do. We might be feeling also we need to go into fight, flight, or freeze. So, what would freeze look like in your situation? You might not think of what to say. You might just kind of sit there and get disengaged or dissociated. A fight response might look like you're saying something really angry. What's the matter with you that blah, blah, blah? Sometimes we say things we regret later when we're in a fight response. What would be happening in your body? You might feel hot, outraged, angry. Whatever your situation is there, let yourself stay here in your body. Take a few longer breaths. Look around, see what else is here. So if it's one person's face and that's everything that's in your image, take that step back, see the other people in the room, see yourself in the room. Take some deeper breaths. The image of something that might be dangerous in real life when it's actually happening. We're looking at an image of something, so that is not in itself dangerous. However, it alarms our nervous system. So, what we're doing is sending signals. It's still okay for me to breathe. It's okay for me to relax my shoulders, let my shoulders move away from my ears. It's okay for me to take some deeper breaths. Even a threat that feels immediate, there's something going on here that I need to do something about when I'm in that situation next time. Next time I'm in that situation, I might say something. I might choose to notice when I'm going into fight, flight, or freeze and then change my focus to regulating instead. I might just say, I'm not going to get into that situation again. I'm not going to go back in there with that person. I'm going to hire someone to protect me from that person, whether that's a lawyer or maybe you could engage a friend for that. So there's lots of different situations we could be working with. How could we stay regulated? So, this is a really interesting experiment to see how our brain and our nervous system will signal danger and that we need to go into fight, flight, or freeze. And that when we change our focus to regulating, our perception of threat at the moment starts to get a little bit more clear. Let's take a few breaths here. And we're going to finish the inquiry. So let go of whatever it is you're looking at, whatever it is you're thinking about, and come back into your own situation right now, into your own body, into the room that you're in, into the breath. And then let your breath come back to whatever it wants to do. Look around the room and put your hands on your heart or hold your own hands for a moment. Let yourself feel that you're here for yourself. We were just doing something that made us uncomfortable, and we lived through it, and we supported ourselves, and we were able to regulate depending on the level of threat. Maybe we regulated back into a state of calm. Maybe we were barely hanging on to that, coming back and forth into fight, flight, or freeze, and then into regulation. But we were doing that for ourselves and being present. Let yourself feel your own support.